Morena. As I've been introduced, my name is Maru Nihoniho, and I'm the I'm the founder of my company, Meteor Interactive. That's me. And I'm going to show you how fish and chips, spacies, telephone boxes led me to game development. Oops. So about 15 years ago, I had this dream to change what I was doing. At that time I was working in hospitality, and I had been working in hospitality for about 14 years. And I really had an idea at that time to develop computer games. And I was pretty good at playing them. And I was good on spacies, and I'd beat all my cousins and have the high score. And so I didn't think at that time there was, a big difference between playing games and making them. So I took my dream and I thought, right, what's the first step? How am I going to make this happen? It was like an inner call to action about, well, if you're going to say something and you're going to state something, then back it up and go for it. And the only way to get there for me was to try. It wasn't just enough to say, okay, I have an idea, I have this dream, I want to change what I'm doing and start working in the gaming industry. I had to do something about it. So that's where all these thoughts came in, because as I said before, there is a difference between playing games and making them, especially if you haven't made a game before. And so my thoughts were, all right, this is a new business venture. I had been in business in hospitality previously anyway, so I just thought, okay, well, it's not that much of a leap. Business is business. They're going to make money and all that. So all these thoughts are going through my mind, and also the thought of how risky it was to step out of my comfort zone and move into something else. So once I had sort of looked at my dream and gone through the different processes and goals and steps that I would need to do, I went for it. I said to my husband, I'm going to make games. And he said to me, I think you're tired. Go back to sleep. And I said, no, I really, I want to do this. And he said to me, well, how, what's the first step? And I said, yep, well, I've thought about this, and for me my first step is to head off overseas and learn, from these different conferences and lectures that were going on. And that meant travel, and that meant, expenses and all this. So I was putting quite a bit at risk. I upped the limit on my credit card so I could go and travel to these events in San Francisco, Los Angeles, LA, Brisbane and Sydney. I didn't quite make it to Europe, but that was all right. I managed to get and learn a lot of information through travelling to these other events. Because at that time, the game industry in New Zealand was quite small. And there was one other company based in Wellington and a couple of other indie developers. So I'd gone to them and asked them a lot of questions, how, and the best advice I got was, you've got to go to your market. And I was like, oh, that's going to be expensive. Okay. Going to these events, I had stepped out of my comfort zone, and it definitely wasn't easy. I didn't know anyone. I'd get off the plane in Los Angeles, find my way to the conference centre, get there, and there'll be thousands of people there. Crowds and crowds of people. I felt like a little child lost at a circus or something. And I just didn't know who to speak to, where to go. I had a program in front of me with the different streams of talks that were going on. And so I thought, okay, which of these talks is relevant for me in my new business venture? And I'd sit there and tick them all off, and some of them were on at the same time. So I had to plan with jumping into one room and then about half an hour later sneaking out and going into the next room so I could catch the end or the beginning of another talk so I wouldn't miss out. On top of that, it was lonely. You know, I was travelling by myself. I didn't know anyone. People were giving me advice all over the place, you know. When you go to the States, you've got to become American Maru. And I'm like, what's American Maru? And they're like, you know, be really confident, saying, yeah, this is me. And I'm like, oh, that's so not me. So I just thought, that's right, I'll just be me. You know, I'll just rock up to somebody and say, hi, my name's Maru, and I'm started a game development company and I want to make games. And they would look at me and go, pardon? Oh, sorry, where's your accent from? I was like, oh my gosh. Repeat myself, but it was a great conversation starter because we'd start talking about New Zealand and Māori people and how come you speak English, and I was like, oh, that's a long story. So it was really a great conversation starter to, I guess, have my New Zealand accent, and which was helpful in sort of pitching the ideas that I had at the time. So I went to these conferences and I learnt a lot, you know, and I think the important part of the conference was networking. I went there brand new to the industry with no reputation. I hadn't made a game before, but I had all these wonderful ideas for them. And so I came back to New Zealand and I thought, well, what do I do now? And I'm talking about, this is after a few conferences that I had been to. I was pitching a large idea, you know, that was going to cost a lot of money, and realised quite quickly that it wasn't going to happen. You know, my idea at that time was too big. And I thought, well, I have to scale back. You know, the idea I was pitching was character-based, animation-based, would take a lot of funding to get developed, and I'm talking billions. You know, and people would look at me and say, oh, you haven't made a game before, why should we invest millions into your idea? So that's when I came up with another idea. So I took all that I was learning and that I had learnt, and I sort of learnt to pivot in my own mind, because I was set on a path when I went to these conferences about, I know what I want to do and I know what I want to achieve, and I realised quite quickly it wasn't going to happen that fast. So I had this sort of shift in my thoughts about, well, if it's all about having a game credit under your name, and if it's all about reputation, then I better make a game that's achievable and more cost effective. So that's when the focus came in, you know, because I had already had this sort of shift in my thinking, and I came back. After I came back to New Zealand, I decided that, all right, my big idea was that big, and now I've got to bring it down to around about this big. And so I spent the next probably 6 months redeveloping another idea that I had. So I put all my focus into that and built my first game prototype. And to be strong. Oh, right, yes. And to be, I think I've put that in the wrong place. And to be strong, you know, the thing, I guess that comes back to, you know, as a creative, you have an idea in your mind that you want to do, and sometimes when you can't do it, it feels like, well, at that time, for me anyway, it felt like almost the end of the world, because I had spent so much time and energy travelling and pitching this idea, something I really believed in, and it was like no one else believed in it because they weren't willing to fund it. And so when you have a lot of no's, you know, it does make you think, oh, am I doing the right thing? You know, and you do start feeling a little bit down. So, you know, the thing is, when you're focusing, you do have to be strong. When you're in your mind and you have to change your idea, you do have to be strong, because it's not easy. You know, it's something that you want to do, and having to change that just makes it more difficult. Yeah, I did put that slide in the wrong place. Anyway, when I look back you know, from where I started, the journey along the way, how I had to make important decisions that kind of shifted or changed my path a little bit, because, you know, when you get into business, you think that, or you hope that your path is straight ahead, and you've just got to meet these little goals and milestones along the way. Well, my path was like that, you know, it wasn't straight and wasn't easy, it was very curvy and bendy. It wasn't straight like that, it was actually going up a mountain, you know, it felt very hard and difficult at the time. But when I look back on that, that was actually a good thing, because what I learnt from that was that in important times, especially around decision making, sometimes it's good to pivot, and sometimes it's good to make those little changes in your path, because it helps you think about other ideas and how to bring something forward that you couldn't bring forward before. So it's almost like you change the path, there's a new kind of thinking on top of what you're doing. The slides that I've just shown you of the image of this character here, this was my first game idea that I was pitching when I went overseas to all the different conferences. This game is called Guardian, and it features a Maori heroine by the name of Maya. So when I went to these conferences, I'd be like, I have this great idea. It's a big 3D platformer game featuring this character called Maya, and it's all about this and that. This was the game that was going to cost millions and millions of dollars to create. I was pitching this game back in 2003. It is now 2018. And we're about to release episode 1. This is a screenshot from episode 1 of the Guardian story, 15 years later. So I've been very patient. It's not the same game, you know. The original idea was a game like God of War. Has anyone played God of War? So the big third-person action-adventure game. This game is an interactive game book. So at the time, the 3 gaming consoles were PlayStation, Xbox, and Nintendo. So it was targeted for those platforms. Now the platforms are Android and iOS. So how the technology has changed over the years is how I adapted my game story for those platforms as well. So episode 1 will be out soon, just waiting for a good time to release it actually. We've got a bit of play testing to do on the game as well. So you're probably wondering, what's all those images about? Well, that was my character. That was my game idea I first started pitching a long time ago. So I'm going to talk a little bit now. I've taken you through my bumpy road journey into game development and how I got there, and what my first idea was. And so I'm just going to show you a little bit of some of the games that we develop at Meteor Interactive. So that little pivot I had along the path was a game called Cube. So as you saw, Guardian was character based, and of course the expense in developing a game like that is all around the 3D assets and the technical requirements to make a game like that. So my little shift in my thoughts around developing something that was more cost effective ended up being this game here. Totally different. So not character based, because you're a cube. So I went way in the opposite direction to where I was. I went from characters to cubes, and the environment's all made up of cubes. And I came back to New Zealand at that time when I was focusing on what my next move should be. I developed a prototype with a small team, 2 programmers and myself. I took that prototype with me overseas and pitched it to publishers. And that sounds easy, but I pitched it to publishers multiple times at different conferences. And it was the last conference I went to, because my credit card was maxed. That was going to be it. I just couldn't afford to do any more travel or go to any more conferences at this time. I had enough to get myself to Melbourne. Last conference, I had a booth, stood there for 2 days with my Cube game running on my laptop, pitching away to publishers. This is my game Cube, it's for the PlayStation Portable. Oh yes, very nice, we'll get in contact with you. I heard that so many times. And it was the last publisher on the last day that came to my booth and played Cube and said, I like your game, I think it's perfect for the PlayStation Portable and I'll be in touch. And I was like, oh yes, thank you very much. Because I felt like a robot at the time. Oh yes, thank you, thank you. And then I came back, the conference finished, I came back to New Zealand, and the next day I had an email. And it basically said, well, how much do you need to bring this game to market? And I couldn't move from my laptop. I remember I was sitting there going, is this for real? Yeah, so I forwarded the email to my lawyer straight away and I said, are they offering me a contract? And he said, yes, they are. And I was like, yay. So credit card will be paid now. And so the contract was signed and we developed Cube and it was released worldwide in 2007. So that was my foot in the door. And at that time, it was funny how things changed, because then I had people ringing me or emailing me, asking me, what other games have you got in the pipeline? We'd like to talk to you more. And that, and I was like, oh, this is a nice change. Really nice change. Which kind of leads on to the next game. Cube was developed, published, BFM gave me a call and they said, hey, we'd like to interview you and talk about your game Cube that you've just released, internationally, and you come into our studios. And I said, yes, okay, I'll come in. And so I was doing the interview, and at the same time, the team at the University of Auckland were planning to design a game or get a game developed to help our rangatahi with mental health. And they were looking for an Auckland-based game developer, and one of the investigators just happened to hear my interview on BFM, and they said, couldn't believe it, Auckland-based game developer and a Māori woman Auckland-based game developer. What are the chances? And so that's how I ended up working and developing the Sparks game. So I took an idea that they had and transformed that into an interactive game that our young people could identify with, because it features a lot of Māori cultural content inside the game. And it went through clinical trials and came out with effective results, just as effective as treatment as usual. That was my introduction to really how powerful games can be. Because they are interactive and they are immersive, and the learning inside them is self-paced. You can pick up and play a game when you want. And so working on the Sparks game was like, okay, we are going to develop more games like this that have a meaningful outcome. We've developed other games. This one was released last year. It's called Māori Power Wars, and I'll show you a little bit of this game soon. It's freely available now. You can download it from the App Store or Google Play. And I won't talk too much about it, so you can see it in action, or you can download it. But it's in English and Te Reo Māori, so there's an option there. And of course it features Māori characters and creatures, and it's a fun tower defence type game. And the game I've just finished working on now is called Takaro, and it is to teach, while it's targeted towards young people, or rangatahi as well, to teach them what coding concepts are. So it doesn't teach people how to code, but it gives you an understanding about what coding is. So I might have time to show you a little bit of that too. And that's one of the screenshots. This game is Cube reimagined with additional learning outcomes on top of it. So I'll show you some of these games now. Well, maybe I might get a chance to show you one. Yeah. I'll pop that on there carefully. No, that's going to fall off. I'll put that down. Actually, I'll show you Takaro first. Should I turn the sound up? I'm just scared it will just go poof. Okay, because it's on mute at the moment, but I'll unmute it. Oh, the sound's coming through from the other game. I'll just mute that. There we go. Okay. So this is Takaro. This is the one that's going into our stakeholder groups for testing. And I'll jump to a level that I know I can pass. Okay, I'll come back into this one. So this hub teaches you about loops. So what is a loop? Are you going to load for me? Yes. Oh, it's a little bit laggy. So you are this cube here, and you roll along these platforms. It can be a little bit confusing because you flip around and all that, but that's something that's purposely done because of the spatial awareness and mental rotational skills that might be helpful, I guess, in pre-STEM learning. So, now that I've got to a hacking window or the terminal, this is where I learn and understand more about coding concepts. So, I have to get a little rolling robot to the little pink terminal up the back there. So in its simplest form, what I'll do is choose from my library over there, move forward 7 times. Okay, so I'm telling the robot it's got to move forward 7 times. And I'll execute that code. Okay, so I achieved that. I told the robot to move forward 7 times. But the next level will show you how to do the same thing, but in a shorter way. So this time we're going to use loops. So same thing again. So this time I have a command there called loop. What container, I should say. I'll just skip through that because no. So first of all, we'll put a loop up, and then we'll put the move forward inside the loop. So before I place 7 different move forwards, but this time I just need to place 1 loop with 1 move forward inside the loop and make that move 5 times. So it makes it shorter. And so it goes through the sequence up the top so you can see how the code's being executed. That's finished. So that's the idea about what the Takaro game is, and it takes the player through each aspect of coding or understanding the concept behind coding. So it's not a game that's going to teach you how to write code, because there are plenty of those games out there. But this is a way to get young people to understand that coding is not as hard as what it is if you understand the concepts behind it. Yeah. So I'll just come to our other game, which is Multi-Power Wars. How much time have I got left? Enough? A couple of minutes? Yeah. Okay. All right.
If people need to go, you can sneak out, guys.
Yeah. I'll quickly show this game if I can quickly show it. Depends on the loading time, so we can choose here English or Māori. Go for English. Okay, I'll skip through the things here. So basically what you do is these little mounds or hills there, you build your part on them. And how you do that is just click on it. It's got some really cool sound effects in this game. Awesome. So I've built 2 pa, and the enemies will start coming up here, and I've got to stop them from getting to my gate at the top underneath the pause button. So you don't do much, but what you do is use your strategy in building your path. Good, see? One's getting up there, so I should put another pa up here. Oh. Oh, he's still going. I'll put another one here. Oh no, I'm out of feathers. Oh, what am I going to do? Ah, one will get through. But he's not supposed to. That was a big fail. And I've played this a million times. All right, I'll pop another one here. Yeah, so it's all about sort of knowing when to use or where to place your pa sites, and then building up the currency to build better and upgrade your pa as well. So as you can imagine, the harder the levels get, the more crowded your path gets, and which makes it more fun. It makes it harder as well. Right, I've got a little item that's just opened up here, extra help, so I'm probably going to have to use it if these guys up the top get through. Yes, he got through. So I will just put my extra help there. There we go. Saved one. So the more enemies come out, the bigger and harder they get. And eventually you get to levels where you are stopping more birds and giant catapult spiders and all sorts of creatures and characters, which is really fun because the spiders look really gross and you don't want them to get through, and they bite you like that. And yeah, so that's Pa Wars, our game. This one you can download now and play. Freely available. Just put it out there because we want to have te reo, you know, the te reo language out there in as many games as possible, and also a game that our young people will want to play. So we looked at the market and we saw that a lot of teenagers like playing tower defense type games, and I mean they like playing big 3D beat 'em up games as well, but that requires, you know, quite a big budget. I'll just pause that. Yeah. So if there's still time, if somebody wants to ask questions, or are we kind of out of time now?
Yeah, does anyone, first of all, thank you so much.